Eye on Gauteng, brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Economic Development.
On the show, we will highlight the business, investment and economic story of Africa's economic powerhouse. Now, as global uncertainty increases and the South African economic growth slows, the need for sound planning is becoming ever more important. Now, Gauteng, which houses more than a third of South Africa's gross domestic product, is the economic engine of the nation. Now, tonight we examine the growth plan of this province, which contains about 22% of South Africa's population and yet sits on just 1.4% of the total landmass of South Africa. Now, joining us to shed light on this and other issues is the Gauteng MEC for Economic Development, Qedani Mahlangu, and policy and economic analyst at the trade collective, Lebohang Pheko. Ladies, thank you very much for your time and welcome to the show. This is the very first time that we're going to be discussing Gauteng in particular. And 2009 to 2014, the Gauteng Economic Department has a growth plan. MEC, could you just outline some of those salient points?
Our growth, Gauteng economic growth and employment strategy focus on a number of areas. One of the key pillars of the strategy is about ensuring that the economy grows and by focusing on the areas that previously we've not been doing well as a country. That is the pharmaceutical, and the second one is about the green economy. As you know, that with the challenges of electricity, the alternative and renewable energy becomes an important area of focus. On the pharmaceutical, on the basis that more than 70% of what the health sector in the country, private and public, spend, majority of those things are imported from overseas. Therefore, there's a need for us to look into how do we reduce costs in the health sector by creating productive capacity in South Africa, but also that will benefit the continent as a whole. I'm talking about API, about production of consumable and non-consumable things that are consumed in the health sector. And of course, the third element of it's about just ensuring that our manufacturing base, we used to be the manufacturing base of Southern Africa, anchoring around mining and also around the steel industry, largely looking at Ekurhuleni. Today, that status has declined a lot, and therefore we need to looking into what manufacturing can do as part of job creation, but also as a backbone of this economy, which is a Gauteng. And of course, the fourth and most important issues around the improving efficiencies in the Gauteng economy are from telephony as well as telecommunication costs around the ICT, broadband, and access to those, and also supporting SMMEs using ICT as an economic enabler to grow our economy. So looking into now all of those, of course, strategic thrust of what the GEGDS is about, key to this about the strategic economic infrastructure, which will enable us to work with the private sector in a triple P partnership, such that we are able to create infrastructure and create conducive environment for investors, local and overseas, for them to expand or to create new businesses. So that's like real silent features of the strategy.
Right, Lebohang, I want to bring you in here. The MEC talked about those sectors, and yet the manufacturing sector remains the mainstay of most of the labor market. Are you satisfied that those objectives are going to at least be labor intensive?
The difficulty is that most of the sectors have been shedding in terms of capital intensity in the last 20 to 30 years. That's not only a Gauteng thing, that's a South African-wide thing. It's also to do with the counter-cyclical nature of our economic growth. And what we see in Gauteng is that we see the trends which are set for the rest of the country in advance. Now, the things that are now running, the sectors which are now running the economy in Gauteng would be things like your financial services, your IT, and your IT sector. The manufacturing sector is shedding, but that is actually where most of the activity is taking place. The mining sector traditionally as well has been a mainstay. However, one of the things that is also critical to understand is that we have the highest GDP across the country, and it contributes to a large percent, 17% of the national GDP. And what we need to do is to figure out ways in which, this being an urban city and a very urbanized region, to make sure that it's not only labor and capital intensive, but that it gives rise to other concerns and other social and economic dilemmas around retaining an employed workforce, a very
I think we get to the social to the social economic imperatives in the second half, but I just want to also get the MEC in here. MEC, if you look at those sectors of the economy that contribute most to the Gauteng economy, we have, as Lebohang says, the business services sector. But second is the government services as well, and government is seen as a very key driver of economic growth. Now let's get back to the actual growth path and how government plans to practically stimulate growth, because as it is, you are the second largest contributor to economic stimulation in the province.
The important thing is that I don't believe that government should be creating jobs using the public sector in propelling the numbers, or in actually taking the numbers of unemployed people into the system. Where there are vacancies that must be filled and you require skilled people, that must be done. Of course, there's EPWP program which look at short-term work opportunities and training people around skilled. That is important. However, government must focus on, which is what we are doing now. I take the point about manufacturing, but you can't ditch manufacturing because over the years it has been declining. However, what we need to look into, what is that we must do better for manufacturing to grow in the province. For instance, part of this strategy I'm outlining to you is that the mineral beneficiation, which is what South Africa over the years and the continent has been producing, but those things are sent out of the country. They come back as finished goods, and we buy them very expensive. Part of propping up manufacturing is to create capacity to beneficiate products from when the cow is slaughtered up until you get a pharmaceutical product out of those byproduct that comes off. That's what we're looking into. From a steel product, from when it comes out of the from metal steel, or wherever you get steel from, up until it gets into a car. All of those manufacturing things, that are the stuff we're looking into. And thirdly is the manufacturing of the making of jewelry in South Africa. We've spoken to a lot of investors as we speak now. We're on course in improving issues around manufacturing and getting investors. Have traveled the length and breadth of different continents in the world looking into what has worked in supporting manufacturing. But most importantly, around manufacturing is the issues around the textile industry. South Africa produces a lot of things. However, the quality remains a challenge. We are working with universities as well as FET colleges and big players like countries like Italy and all of those who are well known for their brands and all of those, to say, how do you partner with young designers so that they can indeed produce quality things so that tomorrow those things can end up in the international market. And we've got agreement with a number of players in the world to look into this. Of course,
I want to pick up on the whole issue around beneficiation, MEC, and I want Lebohang to come in here as well. Lebohang, the whole cost efficiency that we talk about when it comes to beneficiation, politically it's a very sound argument, MEC, but at the end of the day, investors, when they come here, they also want to profit. And studies have shown that sometimes it's a bit expensive to actually beneficiate in South Africa comparatively to India.
It depends on the volumes. It depends on the volume and time.
But I mean, can we make a case for that? I mean, our competitiveness when we want to beneficiate those products, those finished products.
From where I'm sitting, I've spoken to investors from India to Dubai to Italy to different parts of the world, and all of them without exception say, tell us tomorrow, when can we come to South Africa, including Intake. I was in Intake 2 or 2 weeks ago. Tell us what are the tax incentives and the tax environment will come in tomorrow. We've appointed a transaction advisor to this effect who's going to guide us into this area. We've also appointing some Italian lady who's going to be our major consultant in working with a transaction advisor. As I'm talking to now, and people I'm referring to are not your small players in the industry. The lady we're employing is someone who's got a connection with people who own your Cartier, your Louis Vuitton, or in that jewelry sector. So we're not playing in the small space. And as well as we're targeting the Arab countries or your sheikhs and then all over. So we've got a different segment of the market that we're looking into. And I'm very confident with the investors I've met personally overseas who are going to have a meeting with them.
So the appetite is there.
Absolutely.
But Lebohang, do you want to come in here quickly?
Basically, I mean, the notion of beneficiation is extremely important as a business case, not only because it is more sustainable, but also because it is to do with skills transfer and a sustainable development model, economic development model. There are choices to be made, I think, in any economic trajectory in terms of deciding whether to pay less now and sacrifice our own sense of quality, sacrifice our own sense of skill.
Do you think we're too expensive as a country? I mean,
it's very relative. I think it's relative to our GDP, it's relative to our per capita growth. It is relative to our consumption base. It is also relative to our currency exchange. I mean, there's all kinds of input and output factors which relate to expense. But I think that there's no country which started out producing things which were excellent. Japan, after the Second World War, for example, had a really dodgy reputation for selling really bad radios and really lousy electronics. But with time, they were able to improve their brand. China as well at the moment, I mean, there's still this reputation that they have that some of their things, especially the more mass-produced, especially their textiles and their clothing, are on the less qualitative side. However, they are continuing to produce and their output is in high volumes. And I think that we shouldn't fear
So
that.
Basically you're saying that the Gauteng provincial government is on the right track with their plans with regards to beneficiation?
In one respect, especially in terms of protecting the manufacturing and textile sector in this country, which has been labor absorbent historically and which has taken quite a pounding over the last 10 to 15 years in particular.
MEC, I want to engage you about our social economic imperatives. Of course, jobs and jobs. 2011 is the year of jobs, as the president of the country has said. And I think Gauteng's unemployment rate is sitting at, I think, 24%, if I'm not mistaken. And the plans are to half that. Just very concretely, MEC, how are we going to get to some of those targets?
We're going to get there by working with the private sector very closely. Firstly. Secondly, we are improving the business environment under which businesses are operating. And I've seen in Turkey doesn't give people business a lot of money. All they do, they've created conducive environment for business to prosper, and they're doing exceptionally well. So that's what we're focusing on. Thirdly, is to look conducive environment. Okay. Thirdly, is to look into the ICT environment, the cost of telecommunications. I've said the issues around broadband and having access to all of those things. So those plans are intact. Actually, before I came here, we had a very good meeting with APSA, and of course, we're talking to all banks about what is that we're going to do from a PPP point of view in ensuring that all these plans that we have find itself for financing of the private companies that are coming here from overseas, partnering with local companies to do things. And I think what is of importance for me going forward is really about the South African government, nationally in particular, is to define sectors in our economy that are going to be protected from foreign foreign companies. For instance, if you look at Turkey, they will charge Turkish companies in the textile industry if they want to buy raw materials that Turkey has, they want to buy them from China because it's cheap. They'll charge them a huge percentage, a penalty, so to say, and therefore protecting the local industry. And that's one of the things that we really have to look into and make sure that those sectors and particularly those that are feeding into the manufacturing sector are well protected, because it's not wrong. Many countries are doing this, and increasingly as I travel and talk to business, big and small, all over the world, I find that many countries are taking a reality check to say, hey, yes, there's China. However, locally, we have our own political and economic imperatives in our own country around skills, around all of those things. It's important, therefore, to look into a local production in any country. And I've seen this all over the world. I
think on that note, our own, each individual country's social and economic imperatives, we're going to take a break and then talk about that in the second half. We're going to take a break now, and after the break, we look at the socio-economic imperatives for Gauteng and how easy is it to do business in this province. Stay tuned.